When I'm building Kotlin multi-platform applications nowadays, I'm actually not using Compose multi-platform that much anymore in order to just share the UI between Android, iOS, and possibly other platforms. There are still use cases where I do that, or sometimes I use it to share code between some of the platforms. But over the time, I got to the conclusion that usually a real native UI on iOS and on Android just feels much better. Because if we think about it, KMP on the lowest level, if we take a look at the binaries, it already gives us truly native apps. But the only thing that usually does not feel like native apps is the UI, because it's not native. At least if we use Compose multi-platform. Because the moment we stick to Compose multi-platform and then render that on an iOS device, then in the end, all those Compose UI elements will be translated to so-called skia draw instructions that will then just be rendered on a plain canvas on the iOS side. So it's not really about using the real native UI components that you would also have when working with Swift UI, for example. And while you can use certain native UI components from iOS in Compose multi-platform as well, with all those UI tab view things like elements, that's possible, but it's rather something you want to do just in case you maybe need a native element here and there and you need to reference that in Compose multi-platform. But if you want the full UI of your app to feel fully native, then I actually nowadays build that separately. And that's actually one of the superpowers of Kotlin multi-platform, because it allows you to do exactly that. It lets you share everything of your code in Kotlin and just lets you build the UI natively. And especially with the help of agents, of AI, the actual code duplication here, that you just have the same UI kind of twice, once in Swift UI, once on the Android side, that is not a real bottleneck anymore. Because in the end, your agent can just take a look at the native Android UI, for example, and just translate that to a Swift UI. And because the behavior is already set in stone on the Android side, and the behavior is part of view models anyways, which you can also share. So it's really about just replicating existing UI in a way that would be optimized and considered the native feel on the iOS side. And that's something that is pretty simple, actually. And that is something I'm going to show you here. So my approach of how I'm actually doing that, some challenges, some trade-offs, and how you can actually do the same in your KMP app. So here, I've built a little note-taking app on Android, and you can see the typical Material 3 look. It feels very Android-ish, kind of. And if we also click here, you can see it's not the most beautiful app, but it's in the end mainly to show that this is kind of the Android native feel, because, well, the default components on Android are material design components. We have those little material design icons. We have these text fields. We have a floating action button in order to create a new node here. We have here like a little filter option in order to filter for the favorite node. Same thing here to filter alphabetically or by creation date, I think. So this overall just feels like Android, and it is an Android app. But let me now show you the identical app, identical at least in the sense that all the code is shared except for the UI. Let me show you that on iOS. Here it is. And you can instantly see that this is not Compose multi-platform. This is just how an iOS app feels like and should feel like. This is what iOS users enjoy. Look at these liquid glass effects here. Some things like the floating action button, that's something that's not so typical on iOS. This actually moved up here, which is more like a typical destination for creating a new node on iOS. We have these different styled icons where we can, in the end, mark an item as favorite. Here we can also do that. But it's just all in a slightly different style. If we click here, you can see this looks much more iOS-like. We have these iOS text buttons. Well, this could also be red in this case. But you can see how native this feels, because it is now native. And this is actually the exact same app. The only thing that's duplicated is the raw UI. The view models are shared, dependency injection is shared, the domain layer is shared, the data layer is shared, networking, database, everything is shared in Kotlin. Just the UI is implemented separately. And this is super cool, because I think the advantage of having an iOS app that actually looks like iOS is so big and completely justifies that you just need to implement the UI twice in this case. Of course, sometimes you have something like a custom UI that would look very close on both these platforms. So this is now, of course, an extreme example. We have material design on Android and all these native iOS elements on iOS. But still, even if you use custom design system, there are usually some kind of UI elements that also come from from what the platform has intended to be used. Even if it's just like a pop-up menu here also, this can also be part of a custom design system. So there will still be elements when having a custom design system that will still just make this overall thing feel more native if you build it natively. Also things like these scroll effects. Look at that, what happens here to the to the node's title. This is something you don't get with Compose Multiplatform in the same look that people already know from other apps. However, doing this does come with a few challenges and some trade-offs you have to make, which is really what I want to show you. So I will walk you exactly through how my setup looks like in order to achieve exactly this kind of effect regarding the UI. And the very first, and that's probably the biggest challenge that we have here, is state observation. Because of course, ideally, we also want to share our view models, because our view models contain usually a lot of code that decides about how state looks like. And even though the UI itself looks differently, typically we want to have the same behavior. Maybe the call to action here, the floating action button, moved from the bottom to the top. So the actual visual arrangement, that may differ, but what a user can do on a screen and what happens when they click a certain element, that is usually the same on iOS as it is on Android. So a big advantage would really come from us being able to also share the view models with our state flows, with our maybe on-action function, with all the state transformation logic. But given that we now actually have to implement this UI here in Swift UI, we also kind of need to observe that state flow coming from the shared view model. And that's the first challenge because Swift UI doesn't know state flows, and there is no real way, like a native way to observe a state flow in Swift UI, because it's not an iOS thing after all. So Swift in the end has its own kind of data structures or state objects, observables, that we would have to use in order to make this work. But luckily there's a very nice library from TouchLab. I have no idea how to pronounce that, SKIE, Ski, Sky. Maybe some of the developers could comment here. But it's in the end a Swift Kotlin interface enhancer. So it's kind of a plugin or a library that you can add to your project. And what it will do is to take these typical Kotlin language constructs like a state flow, and it converts that automatically to something that Swift understands. In this case, for example, an async sequence. Or also things like Kotlin sealed interfaces or sealed classes will be translated to Swift enums. Because now, of course, the moment you work with Swift and you have a different language in the same code base, you kind of need to optimize this interoperability a little bit if you need to access certain Kotlin code from the Swift side, which would be the view models in this case. And the way this works is, if we now take a look here at this whole setup, and maybe to just walk you through that generally, the Android-specific UI I've now put here in this Android app module, which is really the entry point. Here we now have our navigation for Android. We have our node detail screen, node list screen, and it's really just the same kind of practices that I would stick to in a normal Android app. We have our normal scaffold, snack bar host, we have a top app bar, so all the material stuff here just for the Android side. But then we also have the same here in iOS. So here in the iOS app folder, we will then have our detail screen, list screen, and those are really just Swift files now that, if we take a look here, so the detail screen is in the end just what receives the raw state. This is what makes this whole thing also previewable on the iOS side, because the moment we would couple this UI to a view model reference, the view model would not be initializable in the preview, since there needs to be there need to be some more dependencies that need to be created, like repositories and so on. So that is why we have this pattern of having a root. I don't want to say composable, but root screen in Swift. It's a struct, or actually a view that receives the view model. This is not previewable, but it's actually built in a way that it does not need to be previewable in the first place. So we just observe this view model here via the state. So this is now the kind of Swift observable data structure. Doing this, observing the actual node detail state and the view model as a real observable Swift property kind of, this only works because I've added this ski, sky, something library from TouchLab. Because if we take a look at this here, especially together with this down here, so this is in the end how you observe new state and also new one-time events from a channel. This also works by just adding this task modifier. I think it's also called modifier here in Swift, to this node detail screen after all. And so this again Swift, but thanks to this ski library, sky library, we can have this pattern of saying for await new state in view model state. So this will in the end just always call the moment there is a new state emission from our view model, and we simply update our local Swift specific state. So this is actually something that does not directly come from the view model, but something we simply keep updated here in the UI after getting it from the view model. And the same thing here for these events. This is our events channel, which comes with a sealed interface. What actually happened. So for example, when the node was deleted or saved, then we just want to navigate back. So this is also how we can handle these one-time events here on the Swift side. And a little trade-off of this approach is that you also have to remind your agent or yourself of actually calling viewModel.dispose here. when the view disappears, because the normal like view model uncleared won't fire since it's not tied to anything where a view model can be tied to. Since we're on Swift, we don't know the Android or lifecycle specific view models, so we have to manually dispose the view model here when the view itself disappears, in this case, the screen. But those are, of course, trade-offs that are usually very worth making. You could, of course, also think about not sharing the view models and actually duplicating them. So then you would have a true Swift-specific presentation layer here. This would also work, of course. But then the downside would be that you have to duplicate the state mapping logic and all that. And especially if you have a very stateful app, it's, of course, very advisable to share that, since then you, on the one hand, of course, minimize bugs. Since if there is a bug, you just need to fix it once. You only need to test this class once. And you really just have minimal duplicated code, which is, in this case, really just the raw UI itself. But with this approach, really, like you can also see here in Xcode, that the previews will work not for the root composables, the root views, but for these actual screen composables that contain the real UI. You can see that's perfect. You see exactly what is built here. And the code itself, like the state and all that, that is still handled on the Kotlin side here in our view models. Some more challenges here include, of course, the moment you use resources, since these that would be something you would have to duplicate in that case. You can't use compose multi-platform resources in this case to just share that for every single platform you have. And you also can't really reference any resource IDs or so in your view model that way. So instead, you would have to work with some kind of enums, for example, different types of errors. And these error enums you would then map to the corresponding platform-specific resource ID in the UI. That's maybe just a little bit of a different thing on how you would handle that, but definitely something that's doable. Something that you could think about is what happens if you actually also target other platforms. So, for example, desktop and web, and not just Android and iOS. Well, in that case, I would simply use Compose Multiplatform, assuming you want to have the Compose and Android-like look for Android, desktop, and possibly web, and then just have the iOS UI specific on the iOS side. So that would, of course, also be possible. And a little downside here, just something you have to be aware about. It's not a big thing, but just something you have to know is that the ski library is coupled to your Kotlin version. It could just be that at some point you are blocked by this library from updating your Kotlin version. I mean, it's from TouchLab, so it's usually well maintained here. But it could be that a new Kotlin version comes out, has a cool feature that you want to implement, but the library is not yet updated to that new Kotlin version. So you just have to add this library here, otherwise this won't work that easily out of the box. But I think if we take a look at the result here, really having this kind of UI versus this kind of UI on Android, where an Android user would feel like home, an iOS user would feel like home in this case, that definitely justifies this little bit of overhead here. Of course, there's a bit of boilerplate code here for the root views on the Swift side, but that's definitely something I would tolerate, I would consider okay. And that's what I would really nowadays stick to for most projects at least. They're definitely somewhere I would say, okay, Compose Multiplatform will also do the job, but I just think this advantage of having this super native feel is worth so much. And this really makes Kotlin Multiplatform the perfect framework in order to build native apps while sharing really the vast majority of the logic. And that, again, together with the progression of agents and agentic coding, it got so easy to just migrate code, to have existing code in Compose and just tell it, hey, I want to have this in Swift UI. Then you just have a bunch of skills that teach this pattern, that teaches your Swift-specific styles, and there you go. If that's, of course, something you want to learn, so how you in the end have your agents or your agent teams and really build stable workflows for them, where you have like step-by-step instructions that they really also consider, where you have your verification loops that they really self-correct, where you have quality gates, the right kinds of CI pipelines that just really make sure that the output from the agents is really solid. That's exactly what we teach in the AI-first app developer mentoring. I'll include a link down below. It's really a big thing. That's a complete new skill that, yeah, everybody has to learn after all. Everybody has to get nowadays. It's increasingly becoming a requirement in jobs as well to just be into these workflows, be into these AI strategies, know how to use agents to migrate code, to write new features, to change existing code, work with that on legacy code bases. And all that's, of course, something that we teach in the mentorship. We review your AI setup. We review how you work with these agents, how you prompt them, and of course also make sure that your technical base is really at a point where it's completely fine for you to start working with agents, because they can only output code that is at a quality that you could write yourself. And if your own code quality is brittle and you have gaps that you may not know about, then you're not ready to work with agents because you won't be able to properly fix the gaps in the output from these agents as well. So that's something we take a lot of care on, but also something we would have to check in detail if this makes sense for you. But down below is a link to apply to this mentorship. We would have a very detailed chat and check of your situation to see if this makes sense, how we can best help, and then in the end build and craft a customized mentorship path for you. So check it out. Other than that, thanks for watching. I will see you back in the next video. Have an amazing rest of your week. Bye-bye.